dear students, welcome to the discussion of the environment and disaster management part of UPSC mains paper of GS3. I know seeing the GS1 paper and GS2 paper, some of you have the feeling that the paper is somewhere on to the easy to moderate side, which is there, not too difficult. Questions are seemingly direct. This trend happens to keep on when it comes to environment and disaster management and even science and tech also. But one significant thing that was even predicted in the environment classes that I had taken was there would be more weightage for environment. So if you look over here also, environment and disaster management combined, we have almost 5 questions, marks ranging from 10 to 15. We'll be going into the details of these questions, but understand there has been considerable more weightage given to this area in comparison to your science and tech part, which is there. Combinedly, environment, science and tech and disaster management has almost 8 questions asked this year. This is a significant improvement over the last 2 years. Okay, so this was something that we had foreseen because India is taking a lot of global leadership when it comes to environment related matters. So this is something that we had foreseen both for prelims and for mains, that we will have an importance given to these areas. Now, without much delay, let's go into the question. I must tell you, most of the questions are direct hit and run questions sort of a thing, where you will have just a direct question and the related subtopics related to it. So if you are quite well versed with some of the factual details also, it will be in help when it comes to the environment questions. The first question is with respect to environment is a question of 10 marks. The question is related to dam failures. The question reads as, dam failures are always catastrophic, especially on the downstream side, resulting in colossal loss of life and property. Analyze the various causes of dam failures. Give 2 examples of large dam failures. So this 10-mark question has been described into, I would say, roughly 3 parts, because the first part actually deals with the impact of dam failures. Then there's the second part which deals with the causes that they have asked directly, and then there's a third part which they have asked about 2 examples. Those of you who have been following the news very recently do know that this question is not just out of the blue. They didn't decide that, okay, let's surprise the UPSC aspirant. This question has a clear reason, because very recently we had the major disaster in Libya, where there was a dam failure and over 6,000 people lost their life in this. So dam failures has been in the current affairs, and it is in that context that this question has been asked. It's not a random question. So we have to address these 3 parts, but get the point right. Though it's a 10 marker, the division of these parts are going to be quite not in a very equal manner. You will see the 2 examples part might take maybe just 1.5 to 2 marks of yours, but the rest of the entire thing would be on the impact and causes. So how do you go about structuring this? See, start off with the idea as to, I have always mentioned this, any kind of question which is asked, when you want to hit an intro from a different perspective than a normal UPSC aspirant writing it, you go about asking why to the question. Why is it that we have dams in the first place? See, in countries like India, which are developing, we do not have a very equal distribution of your water resources which is there. Or because you do not have equal distribution of water resources, you do not have even distribution of electricity associated with it. Which means if we have to have complete electrification of the country, or if we need to have an equitable distribution of the resources of water in the country, we need to have dams. So clear that context first. Give the context to the examiner as to why dams are needed. Now, how will this set you apart from another aspirant? See, most of you, when you read this question, are most likely to start off with dams are these kind of embankments created on water. That is the normal definition, which I will be sharing with you. But those of you who think on a bigger picture scale can show to the examiner as to why, despite having so much of impact, it is catastrophic in nature, but still we do have dams in the country because of what context? We are actually compensating for resource scarcity. So once you set that sphere, the examiner would see the idea that you are a person who is able to see beyond what actually is happening, and you are setting the land lay for the examiner that, okay, this is why we need it. Then you can go on to the normal definition which says what is a dam, or you can start off with the dam failure aspect. A dam failure or the dam burst is a catastrophic type of structural failure characterized by the sudden, rapid and uncontrolled release of impounded water. This is the technical definition. Obviously, when you are in the exam hall, you will not be able to write the accurate technical definition, but at least something of this sort, because they are asking about dam failure, you should be able to write, where the reason why it becomes more catastrophic is because of these things. It's sudden, rapid and uncontrolled release of impounded water. So you can always estimate what would be the danger of it, but all the time it is going to supersede your estimate, because the timing, the rapidity of it and the sudden nature of it is quite something that we cannot calculate in a proper manner. Coming to the next part of the question, which deals with the different causes of your dam failure. So causes of dam failure, I have put a picture over here which is basically representing all the different types of failures that can occur. It is highly advised that in such a question, which is basically about some kind of a structural failure which is there, to always use diagrams, because it communicates better to the examiner. You will see over here that this is the structure. You can have certain errors like cracking in the structure. You can have the low area in the crust of the dam, where what happens is, because of this, the water overtops the dam which is there. Then you have seepage that is occurring in the dam. Seepage in the sense that, for example, wherever there's the contact region of the dam with the ground, you will have some kind of an erosion happening and water loss from that side. You can have some kind of your vegetation growth over here. The vegetation growth over there, the vegetation growth, if in extensive amount, what happens is, can also cause the ingrowth of roots into these structures, can also cause damage. Then you can have certain features like piping, erosion at the outlets of dams, etc. In fact, beyond all this also, so see, this is all what can happen to the structure of the dam, which means it is something related to the internal structure. So these are causes that can be happening because of the structure of the dam. But beyond that also, if at all there is any external triggers like that of an earthquake, or heavy mining in some areas, or landslides in any area, all of this tends to put a certain amount of pressure on these structures which are on the ground, and this pressure can be transpired into causing internal structural problems also. So understand, the defect of the dam can be something because of how it is constructed, or some kind of damage that has happened through it over the time, or it can also happen due to any external stimulus that comes. External stimulus can be anything of these sorts. Any natural disasters, anything that can put a lot of pressure onto certain structures which is there. So keep this in mind. It can do you good if you have that internal division, so that the points will be clearly clarified to the examiner. If you are not doing it also, because it's a 10 marker, you can list down the causes as you know it. Some of the most famous causes of your dam failures are, you have something called as overtopping. Overtopping is basically caused by water spilling over the top of a dam which is there. It is often considered as a precursor of a dam failure which is there. This is something that happens when there is extremely heavy rainfall, thunderstorms, or even landslides in certain areas can create this kind of a compounded effect. The second point is foundation defects on the structure of the dam. Foundation defects includes any kind of settlement or slope instability. And understand, overall, if you take, almost 30% of dam failures happen because of foundation defects. This is something that even I do not know how many of you are familiar with this, but there is a famous dam that is a point of conflict between Kerala and Tamil Nadu, which is the Mullaperiyar Dam. The Mullaperiyar Dam, which has a structuring of in the British era, which is there, is widely considered to be one that has some foundational defects. And this becomes a point of conflict because each of these states say that one says that we have to renovate it, the other one says that no, we cannot have the renovation measures. So this is a to and fro that keeps happening. But understand, this is something that can be compounded into a dam failure if more and more pressure happens to fall on the dam. Then you have cracking caused by movements like natural settling of a dam. Natural settling of a dam happens once a dam has been constructed and created in a manner. What happens is it's like how you place a organ inside or an artificial organ inside your body. After a point, it has to get enmeshed with the rest of the organs which is there. Similarly, here also, once a dam is constructed, what happens is you will have the growth. For example, if this is the dam constructed over here, after a point, this is a structure that we have created, but this should actually be very much integrated into the ground area which is there. Once that is starting to happen, what would happen is, during that process, because of any frictional forces that happen between the structure and the nearby ground, there can be cracking in the dam. So this is basically due to the frictional forces. So again, cracking can be caused. Inadequate maintenance and upkeep. If you have, this is the point where there's excessive vegetation growing, if there is a lot of natural vegetation and animals and on those kind of pressures near the dam area, that can be caused. So you have to continuously have an upkeep of these areas which is there. Then moving on to piping. Piping is when seepage through a dam is not properly filtered and soil particles continue to progress and form sinkholes in the dam. Sinkholes, even if you've seen in a normal setting itself, are something that gets progressively bigger and bigger, so much to the point that after a point, you will see these huge holes even in the middle of roads which is there. That is actually a compounded effect of different kinds of erosion that happens due to water. So here you are having a structure where you have water itself stored. So the probability that this will cause a lot of erosion is very high. And when that happens is where piping happens in this manner. And this is going to have so much effect because, see, this is something that is not very easily visible to us. This is something that happens over the time. And if there is no continuous upkeep or maintenance, this is bound to happen also. So all of these things, when over the time accumulates, is what causes a dam failure. So if you've understood this, then you have to touch upon the fact of impact of it, because there's a one-liner that says about the impact of it. So obviously the impact of it is because of the sudden nature. You have to say about how there is a loss of life. There is habitat destruction. Sinking of large areas of land. So on the whole, you have to at least touch upon that, because that is also something that is being touched upon in the question. Do not forget to, you don't have to write so many points, but at least mention about few of the impacts, which are quite general points actually. That also should be mentioned. Now moving on to the last part of the question, where there is the point of some of the largest dam disasters which is there. So I'll give you a list of this. One of the deadliest dam disasters that have happened is in China, where you have the Bankyo dam failure. The Bankyo dam failure resulted in the death of almost 26,000. The official estimate is that somewhere around 1 lakh people had perished. Then you have the Teton dam failure, which happened in USA. Then in India, famously, we have the Machu 2 dam failure, which is in Gujarat. One of the primary causes of this has been said the incessant rainfall and the improper design of dams. And then there is also the Malpasset dam failure, which is there in France. You can mention any of this, or you can even mention the current affair part. So you can mention these and you can say even about the current affair part. So that will actually give you, give the examiner that you are in touch with the current affair and even you know the facts of the previous times also. This lists and all were quite famous when the Libyan disaster happened also. So you were expected to see, at least go through or have a brief idea about these disasters which is there. So I hope with that your 3 parts of this question are addressed and that will complete this. So obviously when we write the impact and the cause, you can towards the conclusion part, you cannot leave it at the impact and this part which is there. You will have to conclude as to, despite this, we are taking so many measures when it comes to the protection of dams. You will see that in India also, be it your groundwater authority, in the recent times have taken so many measures when it comes to dam protection, which is so you can mention those, but don't take too much part of it because it should be somewhere in the conclusion part and you can end the answer in this manner. Moving on to the second question, what is oil pollution? What are its impacts on the marine ecosystem? In what way is oil pollution particularly harmful for a country like India? So you have again 3 parts in this question. They are asking about what is the oil pollution. Then you have the impact on the marine ecosystem. And you also have for a country like India. So there are 3 parts again over here. Again, what would be the larger picture? See, you have to think of the idea that this question also has an bearing on current affairs. Very recently, it was described that in the western coast of India, there is this formation of tar-like structures that come and float onto the western coast. Tar, you all understand, it's this combination of a lot of oil and toxic substances all coagulated together. So there was news of how the western coast of India, one of those areas where we have a lot of our major ports, even our fishing sites which are there, is so prone to oil pollution. From the Indian context, this is where the news comes. In the global context, you will see that if you look to the GS2 paper also, there's a lot of importance given to the maritime organization. There's a lot of importance given to sea wealth related aspects. So all this has been in news in the global scale. So let's try to analyze what we have to deal in this question. The first thing is, obviously, you can talk about how India has a 7,500 kilometer long coastline, which is dotted with major and minor ports. And we are having a lot of marine community that is dependent on fishing and its associated industries. So set the scale for the examiner that this is the area that we are dealing with. Then move on to the topic which says oil pollution basically occurs in the form of a thin film of oil on the sea surface, which is called as an oil slick, or oil droplets or oil bubbles dispersed within the water column, or both of these things can also occur. Oil pollution is not equivalent to oil spill. Oil spill is just that film that forms, but oil pollution means the wider spreading of it throughout the water column which is there. So you can basically say oil spill is one of the causative agents of your oil pollution, but don't equate both of these terms together. Now coming on to the impact on the marine life. First of all, let's deal this question in this manner itself. Marine life separately, on India separately. In the case of marine life, we have to first understand you can draw a diagram in this clear manner where, let's assume it like this. You have water where in this manner, just put it like before, after. Before is where you just have the water column in this manner. Oxygen can be easily dissolved. So your marine animals which are there or the plants which are there, they can live in a proper manner. But after this, in this layer, you have water, and then on top of it, you have another layer of some substances. So you can say that here oxygen doesn't get dissolved in a proper manner. So you can just show a very rough diagram that comes to you. So you can show this comparison and then from there start on. So what basically happens is when you have oil mixed with water, starting off with the anatomy of animals, some of these animals which are, for example, you have your fur-bearing mammals such as sea otters, or for example, some bird feathers which are there, which are actually, protecting, or the coating of the animals actually protects it from this inflow of water which is there. What happens right now is oil destroys this insulating ability of these animals, which basically means that when oil comes and falls on the skin, we might not feel it so well, but then for these animals which have feathers or fur on them, what is likely to happen is that heat carrying capacity or the heat protecting capacity of it is lost. Most of the times these animals will die of hypothermia if oil comes and sticks onto their skin. Okay, then you have smaller animals. What happens is this oil, when mixed with water, some animals mistake it for food and they happen to consume it. Obviously, when they consume it, it has toxic content that tends to kill these animals also. So first is they either die of hypothermia or they die of the toxic content in these oils. Then moving on to other animals like dolphins, whales, etc. Dolphins, whales, etc. can inhale oil, which can affect the lungs, the immune function and the reproduction of these organisms. So if you're not in the other aspects, you're not protected from it, but here you are actually inhaling it, and this can also be of cause of danger to these animals. Moving on. So if oil comes and oil comes and falls onto your skin, these are all the different kinds of impact. Then as we move further, when exposed to oil, adult fish may experience reduced growth, enlarged livers, changes in heart and respiration rates, fin erosion and reproduction impairment. Further on, you have fish eggs and larvae that can be very sensitive to the toxic content in your oils. And finally, when all of these organisms consume this oil, and even if they don't die, once it comes to the human or whoever tries to fish it and we consume it, this oil can cause so much of damage to us also. So marine life has both a direct impact and an indirect impact. Now these impacts have been all with relation to the fauna in marine life. With respect to flora, what happens is when oil gets mixed, one of the first defects I told you is oxygen, dissolved oxygen units reduce, which means there is going to be a scarcity of oxygen for the organisms living in it. Be it oxygen or your carbon dioxide, it becomes into a situation where there is no ease of movement of these gases. This can cause a lot of harmful effect on the plant life. Photosynthetic activity might reduce. Even if this is not the effect, what also can happen is we are quite aware of the fact that if you have your plant organisms which are there, they have the stomata and everything on the peripheral layer. What happens is if the oil, this is a much more viscous liquid. So once it comes and falls onto this, what happens is the stomata and the pores on these plants get clogged. Once they get clogged, what happens is ease of transfer of gases, even if gas is there between the plant and that medium, is not possible in a good manner. So the high viscosity of oil can lead to the clogging of pores. So I know it's a 10 marker, but if they ask you marine life, it shows when you divide it into flora and fauna and write itself, it shows that you have some grip over the question which is there. So even under each of these, if you are just writing 3-4 points also, this kind of a division shows that you have some expertise. So divided into these aspects, we've discussed quite number of points. You don't have to write all these points for a 10 marker, because if you sit and write all this, you will not be able to address the rest part of the question. But this is given to you so that you can choose the points that you want to and move forward. Then coming into the specific impact on India. When it comes to the impact on India, you have to understand that we have the threat to the indigenous people which is there. So if you look at it, there's a lot of fishing community. They will start not having enough avenues to fish, get the marine wealth and sell it off, which means that they will be driven into poverty. Because it is harmful to aquatic life. It can also cause even those for example, if you look at it, you have coral reefs, you have all those associated life, it's not just the fishes which are there. So communities dependent on those things also for jewelry, your home decor. These are all things that you are deriving from corals and everything. Even those industries will also suffer. Coming to other animals related, you will see all these effects which are there. Hypothermia, toxicity you can mention, even in the case of the marine wealth of India. Then specifically the threat to mangroves. You know that if you look at the western coast of India, you have a lot of areas which are rich in mangroves, which are actually creating a very good habitat for your edge species. Those who are well versed with environment should make it a point to include these words in your answer. So when you have your edge species over there, you have these very distinct species that occur in mangroves. So when you have oil pollution, that oil ridden thing which is over there, it comes and affects the mangrove growth also, thus destroying the habitat of these species. The economic impact obviously is from the tourism idea. When your coasts are riddled with oil spills, it will not invite tourists. The one big example of this is few years back, we had a major oil spill in Chennai. It was when two major ships collided, and this is known as your Chennai oil spill. But it was seen that because of this, the entire air, land, all of those features in that area started being in a very it seemed very polluted, and it had a lot of impact on the tourism of these areas also. So from that is one learning that we can take. When your coasts are riddled with this kind of a pollution, tourism will be very severely impacted. Coming to power plants, nowadays we have these power plants which are working on wave energy, desalinated water, etc. So here what again is going to happen is, when oil gets mixed with water, you do not get water flowing in that kind of a force. This can actually lead to power plants not functioning properly, and even if they start functioning, oil gets stuck into these machinery of it, and it can damage the power plants also. So again, that is an economic impact. Obviously, fishing and related activities, the export of fishing, all of that will get affected. So you have your impact in that manner also. So when you deal with this question, you have the impact on marine life, impact on India. And when you mention about the impact of India, mention any current affair that you know in this aspect. Mention about the Chennai oil spill. Mention about any other news that you know in this regard. Finally, you can move on to the conclusion, which says that even in India, very recently, we've been doing a lot of research when it comes to dealing with oil pollution. You might be quite famous or familiar with your oil zapper, which is there, which is a combination developed by Terry to actually break down the hydrocarbons in your oil spills, which is there. So there's a lot of methods that are now doing the rounds, and India is actively taking part in it. So even if you look at the very recent schemes which we have discussed for mangrove the protection, which is Mishti, in all of these schemes, you do have the impact to reduce the impact of your oil pollution and erosion and everything. So mention all of that in the conclusion side, and that completes this answer of yours. Moving on to the next question. The adoption of electric vehicles is rapidly growing worldwide. How do electric vehicles contribute to reducing carbon emissions, and what are the key benefits they offer compared to traditional combustion engine vehicles? It's a 15 marker question. So you do know that you have to start off with electric vehicles. Why are we at the junks of these electric vehicles right now? So let's go into the details of it. First of all, electric vehicles, as you know, are combinations that use your battery powered engines. You also have models where you not only have battery powered engines, you have battery along with some amount of fuel which is there. Then electric vehicles are also incorporated when, for example, even to power the battery which is there, you are using renewable energy sources. So this is the idea of electric vehicles. But again, what is the why picture to it? Why are we even behind electric vehicles? Start off from the idea, take globally if you look at it, almost when you look at the road transport sector, this is a sector that accounts for over 15% of global energy related emissions. So road transport is a very serious or has a very serious impact when it comes to your carbon emissions which is there. So when you have a sector that is contributing almost 15% to the emissions, if we have to start decarbonizing the sector, then we have to take immediate measures and we have to take it in a massive scale. So this is where the introduction of electric vehicles takes place. You try to just make small changes in your household or anything, that will not amount to such a big change, but having electric vehicles on the road will actually help decarbonize. Please try using these words in your environment related questions, because this is something that a lot of the government documents keep forwarding it. So this electric vehicles are like the key technology to decarbonize the road transport sector. So now moving on to the benefits in comparison to traditional vehicles. The content for this part is very clearly given in a government document. Anybody who is in the UPSC preparation, you have, that Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, you have a lot of documents which have come in that aspect. There was a report which clearly stated these, benefits of electric vehicles in comparison to traditional vehicles. Pretty sure even the statement for the question is taken from the document itself. So I've mentioned what all are the benefits. Let's go through it quickly. You will see that one of the first things mentioned is, if you take an electric vehicle, you have zero to very negligible tailpipe emissions coming out from it. Tailpipe emissions are the byproduct that normally happens in an internal combustion engine. After the fuel gets burnt, whatever is the byproduct of it gets released from the tailpipe which is there. When it comes to the electric vehicle, because we do not have that burning process happening, it has negligible tailpipe emissions. Zero to negligible tailpipe emissions. You will see that petrol or diesel vehicles emit almost 3 times more carbon dioxide than an average electric vehicle. So that comparison is very clearly shown. So from the emission point of view, we are sorted in the first place. Moving on, the running cost of an electric vehicle is much lower. Now, the reason why they mention it is because, see, if you look from all of the aspect, if you look at the fuel cost of it, you know how the petrol prices and diesel prices in India are. If you look at that running cost with respect to the mileage that you get, you will see that when you have to maintain an electric vehicle, this is actually much more lesser. The electricity cost can be reduced. For example, the only cost that comes with respect to an electric vehicle is to charge the vehicle which is there. Now, to charge the vehicle, again, this is a very valid point that is seen in the document, where, see, the electric vehicle that is currently there is now charged via some, let's say, a charging point. You go and plug in over there. The electricity that you get in from there is at this point may be generated from thermal power stations. See, now what happens is, this is one of the biggest arguments against electric vehicles that they mention, where they say that if you are having thermal power stations preparing that electricity via your coal, or your hydropower stations preparing it via all these methods, where is any electricity reduction happening? Because there you have emissions happening. In a thermal power plant, when you are trapping in coal or any of your fossil fuels, burning it to create electricity, emissions are happening there. So you are just creating a very superficial patchwork kind of a solution. Here is a argument that people say, but the government and scientists say in return for this is that the idea is to eventually not have your thermal power stations generating the electricity, but have renewable power stations, like, for example, solar or wind or wave, any of these energy sources being used, so that on the whole itself, it is a zero emission machine which is there. So you will see that the electricity cost can be reduced further if charging is done with the help of renewable energy sources installed at homes, such as your solar panels, etc. Third point is it's the fourth point over here. When it comes to your electric vehicles, they have very low maintenance costs because they do not have as many moving parts like an internal combustion. You would have every time seen that when you have a normal car which runs on petrol or diesel, you have a fuel injector, you have the motor, you have all of these different parts over there. There's a lot of wear and tear that happens to the vehicle. But when it comes to an EV or an electric vehicle, you do not have so many moving parts in the engine. So what happens is the wear and tear is reduced. This is one of the reasons why there is a low maintenance cost associated with it. In India, if you look at it, one other advantage is, be it the registration fees or road tax on purchasing your electric vehicle. See, they have just asked what is the benefits in comparison to traditional vehicles. So you can mention environmental points, economic points, any points that is in a comparison aspect. So here you will see that the costing of it or the road tax associated with it is very less in comparison with a petrol or diesel vehicle. From an efficiency perspective, electric vehicles convert around 60% of the electric energy from the grid to power the wheels, but petrol or diesel cars can only convert 17 to 21% of the energy stored, which is actually quite less, like almost 80% of energy wastage happens when it comes to a petrol or a diesel car which is there. So here again you're reducing the wastage on that aspect. Moving on, when it comes to an electric vehicle, there are no complicated controls. There is just your accelerator, brake and steer. So it is quite easier to use. Next point is it's quiet. So the thing is that because you do not have a lot of burning and all those kind of noise associated with it, it is seen to have a reduction in noise pollution also when you use your electric vehicles. Final point over here is there's always a convenience of charging. Eventually, when we have a lot more electric vehicles, you're going to find electric charging ports every now and then. If you do have solar panels in your home, you can create a charging station in your home itself. So all of that has a lot of advantage when it comes to a traditional vehicle. So you can show all the differences in this manner. Once you show all the differences, just touch upon the aspect that, see, India is right now moving into the idea of life, which is lifestyle changes for sustainable environment. Electric vehicle is going to be a major leap when it comes to a lifestyle change, because we for the longest time have now been used to consuming your petrol or diesel vehicles. There is an entire industry based on that. So now to shift that is actually a major lifestyle change that we should have. And because of this itself, the Indian government is way in support of these measures. One of the INDCs that we have, where we have now bettered the INDCs. We said that our 40% of our cumulative power generated should come from renewable sources. Now we have upped the target to 50%, which is there. So all of these things are done so that we can have lifestyle changes like this that are much more environmentally responsible. So conclude it in that manner, but make sure that you touch upon what is happening in India right now, because in India, the reason why electrical vehicles are not catching up quite soon is the initial cost of it. You have also the idea where it's a cultural attitudinal shift that has to happen. The lack of proper charging ports that are there, the common misconception regarding a mileage aspect of it, because in India that is quite important when it comes to all of these factors, compounded with the idea that, okay, we need to make the shift is also something. You do not have a lot of convenient models coming in for cars. So all of these things have changed or drawn back the consumer which is there, but you have to conclude on the lines that because the government is on this track, this is a lifestyle change that we can also start to take up, and eventually when more and more demand comes, obviously the initial pricing of it will also reduce. So you can drive your answer into that direction. I hope the pointers are clear. All the pointers mentioned over there are from the government document. So understand, if at all they have made an answer key, it is going to have these pointers also with respect to this question. Moving on to the next question. Comment on the National Wetland Conservation Program initiated by the Government of India and name a few India's wetlands of international importance included in the Ramsar sites. We start off with talking about wetlands. We have to say about a little bit about wetlands, the importance of wetlands. The importance of wetlands in maintaining groundwater, the importance of wetlands when it comes to your aquifers, in creating habitats, ecologically sensitive areas, etc. Starting off, you can mention the importance. I would probably go about with saying that India has nearly 4.6 of its land as wetlands, which is almost 15.26 million hectares, which is there. And you have almost 75 sites designated as wetlands of international importance. Now, once you say what wetlands are, what are the incorporated areas? So I've taught in my environment class also, in India, wetland means any area which has, it can be salty, it can be brackish, it can be fresh water, it can be a lake, a pond, a river bank which is there. So any area which has a considerable water content along with your land nearby is categorized as wetlands when it comes to India. So mention that definition, the importance of wetlands, and then go into the government measure, which is your National Wetland Conservation Plan. The National Wetland Conservation Plan was implemented in 1985, and here you will see that you initially when it was there, even today if you look at it, almost 115 wetlands have been identified by the government. The aim of the National Wetland Conservation Program is to prevent further degradation and to ensure their wise use for the benefit of local communities and overall conservation of biodiversity which is there. So here at this point, go about and mention the objectives of the National Wetland Conservation Program. It basically lays down policy guidelines for conservation and management of wetlands, to provide financial assistance for undertaking intensive conservation measures, to monitor the implementation of the normal wetlands program which is there, and to prepare an inventory of Indian wetlands. So these are very general points. You can mention that, see, the idea primarily is there is your existing wetlands. We will create an inventory for it to give financial assistance and to lay down policy guidelines. Once they have done that, the funding of it is given by the central government. The central government is responsible for the overall coordination of the wetland conservation programs. It provides your guidelines, financial and technical assistance which is there. But the catch over here is, and this is one of the reasons which we mention even in the drawbacks of the program, one of the reasons why this program is not highly successful is because of the fact that the land resources where the wetlands are belong to the state governments or the UT administration which is there, which means that their micromanagement which happens over there has to be undertaken by the state. So if there is a lack of coordination, this proper implementation doesn't happen, and this is one of the reasons why your Ramsar Convention happens to be a much more celebrated and eagerly implemented program than your National Wetland Conservation Program, because this conflict always happens when it comes to wetlands. So you mention wetland, importance of it, National Wetland Conservation Program, the objectives of it, what is the problem of it. These many parts you go about and say. Then you move into the Ramsar Convention. It's a 15 marker. So once you take up Ramsar Convention, you can show up the idea which is, in India, we have certain designated sites which are mentioned as your Ramsar Convention sites which is there. You will also start, see, there are almost 75 Ramsar sites. Some of the advantages of being declared as a Ramsar site is obviously it receives so much of international importance. Then even transboundary sites are included when it comes to Ramsar. Then there's specific focus on the birds and migratory animals associated with your wetlands. These are all the advantageous points of your Ramsar Convention, which is there. When they've asked to mention some of the sites of wetlands of international importance, basically they're asking you to list some of the Ramsar sites. Always pays off not to just write a list over there with the state and everything. If you can draw a very rough India map and show about the sites, most of you all would have the ones which are very familiar. You have the Sundarbans, the Bhitarkanika, Chilika, which is there. Then you have your Koldio in towards the south. You have your Shastam Kota. You also have Point Calumet. Here you have the Loktak Lake. Any of the sites that you're familiar with, any of the 75 sites that are there, try marking it in a rough map. So that shows an extra effort from your side. And don't go about and mark all of it. Don't be that person, because that is going to take a lot of your time to do it. So don't invest so much, because that part of the question will be for not so much marks, maybe 2 to 3 marks, which is there. So for that, you just have to show, maybe you can show maybe almost 8 to 10 sites, which is there, because it's quite familiar to all of you. So you can do that and you can conclude your answer as to what the government is taking measures. This is where all the recent budgetary measures as to how we are focusing. We have an element of the Sagarmala that is also focusing on wetlands and island development, which is there. We have elements of Mishti that is focusing on mangroves and wetland, which is there. So all of these programs, the National Wetland Conservation Rules, which got very recently amended, all of these things can be mentioned in with respect to your conclusion part as to how the government is taking efforts to improve the wetlands of the country. So with that answer gets concluded. Moving on to the fifth and the last question from the environment part, which is there. The question reads as, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has predicted a global sea level rise of about 1 meter by AD 2100. What would be its impact in India and the other countries in the Indian Ocean region? One of the primary reasons why this has come as a question is, last year there was a major report by IPCC in this manner, and they mentioned that India, Bangladesh, Indonesia and few of the countries in the Indian Ocean region are the most vulnerable in this region to be flooded and to be destroyed when there is a sea level rise. So there was a lot of discussion happening in this manner, and this is the current affair context of this question. So we start off by, because the question is fairly direct and a large majority of the points of this is going to go into telling what is the impact in India and the Indian Ocean region. So let's start looking into the impact on India. The impact on India starts with the point of view that, see, if you look at India, you have the major the populated cities of Mumbai. You have the Gujarat region. You have towards, you have Bangalore regions here. Then if you look at this side, which is Chennai, you have Vizag, you have Calcutta. All of these are on the coastline. Barring very few other metro cities, most of our rapidly developing cities happen to be very near to the coastline. Because they're rapidly developing also, these are actually very densely populated cities also. So lay the ground over there, development plus population, which means any impact in the sea level rise can affect all of these major coastal cities which are there. Okay, so set the scale over there. Now coming into the geographical side of it, it has been seen that because of climate change related activities, the Indian Ocean is one of the fastest warming oceans when it comes to surface warming. And we also know that when there is the warming of the Indian Ocean, this has a compounded effect on a lot of other weather phenomenon. If you look this year, for example, we do not have much of rain happening in the southern part, but we have a lot of rainfall and flooding like scenarios happening in the northern part of India. So now all of these are going to give us a very compounded extreme climatic events which is there. So Indian Ocean is warming. This is going to have an impact globally and on India. It will obviously have an impact on the monsoons of the region. One other major pointer that was even said in the report is that you do know that when the oceans warm up, this becomes the source of energy for your tropical cyclones which is there. Which means that in this Indian Ocean region in the last few years, there is a wider or more number of occurrences of cyclones happening. This is primarily due to the heating up of the Indian Ocean. So here you will see cyclones are intensifying rapidly and there is more moisture and heat from the oceans that is being the cause for this. When cyclones happen, what is going to happen? Again, you do know that because of cyclones, all the moisture comes and does a landfall. And here, the amount of flooding is also increasing because of that. So cyclones, warming, cyclones, and then because of it, the flooding also which is there. Cyclones are bringing more rain than earlier. You will see that last 2020, we had something called as a super cyclone Amphen, which was there. It caused large scale flooding of area which is there. So flooding, obviously all the impact of flood is going to happen. That is one aspect of it. But added to that, there is also a problem. See, when you have your seawater or your moisture carried over and does a landfall on the area, on the land which is there, the moisture is laden with salts. So basically, you're getting saline water. It's not that these rains are fresh water which is there. So what happens is this kind of a saline water intruding into the land area has been causing a damage to agriculture. More and more cyclones, more and more damage to agriculture for several years and decades. So you have loss of life happening. Then you have loss of livelihood happening because of agriculture getting affected in this manner. Then as we even go further, you will start seeing that all of these impact is there. On the whole, if you have just normal sea level rise itself, population gets impacted. Then moving on to what happens in the inland areas. See, we don't think, okay, it's not like, okay, sea level is rising, coast will get flooded, all the inside part will be safe. This is where the next point happens. You do know that one of the largest inland areas which are heavily populated happens to be in the Ganga-Brahmaputra Delta, which is there. Now, Ganga and Brahmaputra, both of them being freshwater areas, are serviced by glaciers which are there in the Himalayan region. But you do realize when there is climate change happening, what is going to happen? These glaciers are going to start melting. When these glaciers melt, what we are going to see, it's not like, okay, there's going to be melting, more water will come. Basically, the glacier is now going to be lost, which means at initial period, it will melt and all the water will come. But after a point, there is no glacier to service this area, which means eventually, long time, around 2100 AD, as they have mentioned in the question, we will see that the rivers Ganga and Brahmaputra can actually be even dried out. Because you do not have the glacier servicing this area. The glacier has receded, the glacier has melted, and it is done. So, in the initial time, heavy melting of the glacier will cause a rapid water level rise in these areas. That will affect the pollution. Eventually, the glacier will not be there. And because when Ganga and Brahmaputra get affected, what is going to happen? All these rivers are going to shrink and the entire population around this area, because they are only dependent on these rivers, they will get affected. So on the whole, if you look at it, the sea level rise, the melting of glaciers and everything will make a large part of India uninhabitable if we do not take necessary measures. So this is the impact on India which is there. Impact on the world, when you look at it, again, what is the usual things which is all there, let's have an idea about it. Impact on the world, when I'm saying, it's primarily those areas in the Indian Ocean region. Indian Ocean region has a lot of island countries. And when you have your island countries which are very near to the sea level, these areas can get submerged. For example, increased intensity of your storm surges, flooding, etc. will do damage to coastal areas. Most of the time, it's in these coastal areas where there are large populations, even in those countries. So what is going to happen? Your fragile habitats, large population centers, all of that is going to get destroyed. This is then going to create groups of people who do not have their own land to live, which is going to create large influx of climate refugees. Added on to this, you will see that your destructive erosion, wetland flooding, rising sea levels, as I told you, you will have soil and your salt and everything mixed with your groundwater and normal water aquifers. This will lead to a water scarcity situation. And there's lost habitat for fish, birds and plants also. Added on to all of this, you do know that a large majority of the Indian Ocean regions have tourism as their economic activity. This is going to get severely impacted when these areas are at the mercy of constant floods and constant, destructive erosion activities which is there. So all this is the impact on the Indian Ocean region also. Again, in this question, it would serve you well to show India separately and Indian Ocean region in a very rough manner. At least even you're not showing the countries, also show the regions. The primary regions which are going to get affected is Bangladesh, Indonesia, your Java Sumatra region which is there, Philippines which is there. All of these countries are going to get very severely affected as what was mentioned in the IPCC report. So please show those regions along with this question, but make sure you fill this question with enough quality content, because only then will you get the proper marks for it, because it's a very serious question and the report itself has stated several pointers in this manner which I have shared with you right now. So if make a note of it, these points can be, or this question can be recycled in different forms even for the next mains. So keep a lookout for it. So with that, we come to an end of the questions from the environment and disaster management perspective. I'll be again coming over to you to discuss the questions of science and tech, which are quite less in number, but very important and earlier predicted questions itself. So I'll meet you then. Until then, take care and happy learning.